Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for coming. Kurt, what's up?
Hi.
Welcome to another episode of Labnotes at the Combine. Some new people here I'm seeing, so I will introduce it again. We do it a lot. Sorry. Do you want to try to explain what the Combine is?
Oh,
No? Okay. So there's 4 agencies that use this space. Ben, Simon, Byrne, Narrative, One Method, Folk, and we transform our office into something that's so much more than an office, into the Combine. It's less of a place for working and more a community where you can work and learn and hang out and shop, and this is part of the learning thing, the Labnotes sessions, where different members come up monthly and just talk and hopefully teach us about something that's creative or creative adjacent. And we start every episode saying, will you host a Labnotes episode? So far, 0 people have said yes, but maybe that'll change this time. You didn't answer. Someone mandated you. Yeah. No.
I was trying to pretend like
and then introduce ourselves. So I'm Max. I work at One Method, and this is Kurt.
I am Kurt. I also work at One Method.
And yeah, today's Labnotes is, that's it. There's not much more than that. Episode 4, How to Love the Robots. Talk to me about it. What are we learning today?
We're going to cover the basics, and then we're going to go beyond the basics and show what we actually have done to put this, because I feel like whenever you try and find out anything about AI, there's a lot of this from a lot of people who may not actually, probably haven't actually done a day's work in a long time. Not that I have, but I work with people who have, and so we've been testing these things in practicality and seeing how they actually work, and then we're going to share it with you and then show you the plans for how we're rolling it out throughout the entire organization.
Yeah, I guess some of the back story here is sometimes we do a Labnotes, it's like, okay, let's start with a topic and think about presenting it to the world and our members. This was a little bit the opposite, where you and your team have been working on how are we going to apply AI to our world and to our lives for, since when, February? March?
Around then, I have to give Amin credit, because he came up to me and he was like, we have to do some experiments on AI, and I was like, oh my God, it's another Amin idea that I have to go do. This is NFTs all over again. But he was totally right and I was totally wrong. Yeah, this is 100% something that was worth looking into, and I very quickly realized that, yeah, this was a good idea. So I'm glad he put up with me to get going on doing it.
Awesome. So yeah, so this is the last 3 months of you and your team digging into this world, and then coming out of that, all the findings you've had, all the discussions we've been having. So it's less about, yeah, thinking real long-term future or having any specific answers, and more, here's what you guys have found and been talking about.
Yep, and I want to be really clear, not an expert. If anyone tells you they're an expert, they're probably trying to sell you something. This stuff changes by the hour from what I can tell. Literally, from when I was walking from the bar to here, I got an email that's like, good news, you can now do text to video. I was like, great.
Yeah, you have Runway app V1 in here, I think.
V1 is shown here, and yeah, and V2 is now the
drop today.
Just showed up. Anyone can go do it.
We'll explain that later. If that meant absolutely nothing to you, don't worry at all. So yeah, the things you're going to cover today, I'm just going to sit here and add color, maybe. But you're going to run through the basics, then deep dive into like actual some of the highlights or lowlights from our experiments. Yeah. You're going to dig into 3 tropes, and then looking forward, like kind of summarizing what all this means and what we're working on next steps, but even everyone can just do moving forward. Sound good? Sweet.
Number one, I think it's really important to talk about what part of AI we're talking about, because anytime I've gotten into a casual conversation with somebody, inevitably it spirals out into like, are my kids going to marry robots? Do I have to ask my toaster how it feels today? And I don't know. I don't know if any of that's going to happen. Probably. I don't know. But we're focusing on this part, right? Maybe 1 to 3 years, because it changes so quickly. It may turn out to be not as transformational as we thought. Unlikely, but totally still very possible. Lots of technologies are really important, but take a little bit longer than you think. Think of self-driving cars. Everybody heard about self-driving cars. It was a big deal. I mean, they kind of work. There's like 11 taxis or something in San Francisco. They'll get there, but it took a little, everyone got excited when 90% was done, and that last 10% isn't easy. So we're focusing on the things that we can reasonably kind of look at and realize. So within that, just some basics.
Wait, go back.
Going back.
Let's just hot seat. Where you think we're going at that intersection?
I would like to live in the floating city. I don't know. I mean, life has changed. We literally said, let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
So that was like the one rule.
Curveball.
Made it the first slide. Don't talk about the future of.
I mean, you picked such very cute icons that how could we not? Okay. You're hopeful for up top, and that's end of comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am hopeful for up top. If it's the other one, we won't know anyways. It'll just be Skynet or whatever. AI basics. So today, right now, we have what we call artificial narrow intelligence. We've had that for a long time. It's just now it's evolved and gotten a lot better and more accessible to people. Before it was working more behind the scenes. Now you can deal with it. So that's something that is good at doing a thing. You want it to do one thing, and it's good at doing that thing. We have that now. Then there's artificial general intelligence, which is basically like a machine version of us. And there's debate as to whether or not that's even possible, but we'll see. And then there's artificial superintelligence, which is like when it gets much more powerful than we are, much smarter than we are. Again, people aren't really sure. And again, not to get too like heady in the clouds, but we have some resources at the end we can point you to. If you want to listen to this stuff, it can get a little nuts. But I think the big thing that we're realizing is that for us to recognize a machine version of ourselves, we have to understand ourselves a bit better. Like, prove to me you're conscious. I mean, I know I say that to you a lot, but it's not easy to do, right? These are big fundamental questions that philosophy and spirituality have been wrestling with for thousands of years. What does it mean to be alive, yada, yada. So we're going to be dialing it way back to, smart thermostats. Like, that's a form of artificial intelligence, and it's been around for a long time. They use it for, and that uses a branch of things called fuzzy logic. So this is just showing you what AI, kind of the nomenclature. I spent, a couple hours with ChatGPT one day, just talking it out, figuring out how all these terms relate to each other, algorithms versus this versus that. So AI is like the big overarching term. Anything that's machine learning driven or algorithmically driven, you can kind of call AI. Within that, we have kind of the good stuff that we've been having for a while, and then the sparkly new cool thing is generally is in this machine learning branch. So not even a new idea. Machine learning's been around since like the 1940s, I think, but they just didn't have computers that could handle it, and they didn't have data, they didn't have Reddit to go get a billion different words and things that they could go scan through to train it. So the ideas aren't super new, although there have been new ideas added, but I mean, the core is there. But that branch on the right, that's where we got all the neat stuff that people are excited about now. So ChatGPT and Midjourney and all that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Big time. It's crazy too that we did a version of like an AI exploration team, 2018? I can't remember. But it was all theoretical. So it was just words on slides, and people were like, that sounds great, but we couldn't even go test the stuff. Now you can just jump over and test these things out, and it just feels very different now, which is exciting.
Yeah, the growth rate is crazy. I always get these numbers. I'll just make up statistics. Just trust me, they were big. ChatGPT got like 100 million users in, I think it was like 2 months, something like that. I think Uber took 70. Spotify was like over 100. Like, nothing has ever taken off this quickly. And I've seen technology for however old I am, 20, 30 years. I've never seen anything grow this fast or be this broadly applicable so quickly. So it's probably a thing. Some big companies are up there. Everyone's heard of OpenAI. They're the ones who make ChatGPT. I think they make DALL-E too. Then Midjourney is one that maybe you've heard of that's accessed through Discord, which is a pain in the butt, but it's a great platform for making more fantastical images and things like that. I threw Anthropic up there, even though people don't tend to talk about it too much. I don't know why they don't talk about it. It's got like $100 million of investment money, and they make an equivalent of ChatGPT, unfortunately named Claude. But it's really impressive what it can do. I'll mention it. The thing that's cool about it is it's got a 100,000 token limit. What's a token, you say? So for large language models, when you hear them called like a stochastic parrot, and I've had to look up the word stochastic like 11 times because I keep forgetting what it means, they just mean it's a brute in a way. I'm very much simplifying, and I don't understand a lot. A lot of it goes over, it gets mathy very quickly, but it is a statistical analysis tool. So you can see there that copy on the right, that's 751 characters, but about 175 tokens. So a token is around 3 to 5 letters or characters. And so what it does is it is a very, very good predictor of the next token. That's literally what it does. So when you've asked a question, it takes that input, it looks at the model, any fine-tuning that's happened, all that stuff, and it says, okay, the next word, best, next word, thing, etc. And that's what it does, which is why if you asked it, tell me what the capital of Spain is, and tell me how many words your answer will be before you tell me. Like, before you tell me the thing, you have to tell me how many words your answer is going to be. It would never be able to answer that because it hasn't generated it yet, so it doesn't know, because it doesn't actually know what it's talking about. And we'll get into this, but that's why it's so dangerous when people say like it hallucinates, and we will talk about that. It doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie. There is no real meaning to any of it.
Question: does understanding this help you better, like write better prompts?
That is good. Yeah, it does. So there's a limit on the number of tokens you can send in. So last time I looked, ChatGPT 4, I think the token limit was around 8,000. So even if you have a paid subscription, if you were to, I've tried to paste in a big article that I just don't feel like reading, and I'm like, can you please summarize this? And it just goes like, meh, because I've exceeded the token limit. So it counts the prompt that you send and the completion that it sends back within the same limit. And over the course of a long conversation, it'll just start to forget earlier stuff because it won't just cut you off, but it doesn't have an infinite memory. So that's why Claude was so neat, because it's 100,000 tokens. So you could paste in the Great Gatsby and ask it questions about it.
But that's amazing, and I didn't know any of that. But then outside of even just the total amount of tokens, just understanding that it breaks into that format and it's simply predicting the next token, does that change the way that you write your prompts, or no? You're still just talking to a program?
Not for me. It doesn't change it. I will say that, like, from my understanding, before large language models, when they were trying to do AI, like translation tools, they were trying to teach it languages. They would give it the rules of grammar and spelling and colloquialisms and all this stuff, and it worked like shit. It was terrible. It didn't work at all. And then this, which seems very counterintuitive, works like a charm. So it very much is. That's when they talk about they don't know what's going on. It's a black box for this and for the next thing we're going to talk about, the image generators. It's because they don't. When you have something that's trained on 40 billion tokens and you ask it a question, who knows how it came up with that? And again, we won't get into it, but that is a big area of research where they're trying to figure out how to figure that out to some extent, because it helps you understand. Like they've been talking about how some of these, we'll talk about a thing that Google makes called AlphaFold, which is like an AI tool for folding. It predicts how proteins fold, which is apparently very hard. And they were saying that one of the things that they suspect is that in a way it develops an intuition similar to how a person does through experience, similar to how this in a way has intuition, not in the mystical sense, but in the sense of like it's seen billions and billions of examples. So it just feels that this word comes after this word is more natural. And sometimes with the protein folding, it could be the same thing. It's seen so many variations. It's like, oh, I know how to fold this. It's probably like this and probably like that. And so it works better than trying to be really specific. So it's just magic. You just sort of ask it your thing and realize it's probably lying. These are harder to explain, the large diffusion models. This is what makes the images. The best I can tell, this one gets really mathy really quick, and I did not do well in math. So the best thing I can tell you is that it's based on a form of like image correction, like in the movies where they're like, enhance that part of the photo, and it just magically does it. Well, now it does it. So that's kind of what this is. It starts from a field of just static and nothing, or from an image if you seed it, and then it takes the prompt that you've given it, and then it continues to try and correct or refine the image until it gets to the thing that looks like what you wanted. That's how those work.
Still confused by that one.
Yeah, I don't really get it either. I think there might even be more to it. I'm pretty sure there's actually two of them in there, and they're arguing with each other about, like, is this a convincing banana? And the other one's like, I don't think so. This is not a banana. And then, I don't know, but they do that for a while, and you end up with a banana. So anyway, that's the primer. So we all have the same vocabulary.
Yeah, let's look at the stuff we made.
So we did some experiments. We wanted to see, and this started in February, you said?
I think so.
I don't know. That sounds right. And first thing we did, of course, was La Carnita. So for anyone who's not, who I haven't told this to 600 times, we launched a taco restaurant out of our office.
A decade ago.
About a decade ago. And one of the things that would happen is every time you got food, you would get one of these little 5x7-ish cards with art on it. And someone would get a different artist every week or month or pop up to do the art. And so we put those up against the thing, and then we didn't really know how it worked. We didn't know about image seeding it. And we put them in to try and see if we could replicate things that feel like it. So I forget, maybe it's 5 of these are fake.
4? Yeah,
4 or
maybe
5.
5, yeah. I'm looking now.
Yeah. Any guesses from people who didn't work at La Carnita?
It'd be hard to yell out a square.
I'll just show you really quickly a good tell. It can't spell. It doesn't know what words are. So if you see gibberish letters in a photo, that's always usually a good tell. For now, I mean, I don't know. Next week it spells, I don't know. But for now, when you see letters that aren't right, there's another one there. There's another one, I don't know, that's spelled wrong.
Extra teeth.
Oh, yeah. That one is also a fake one. Fake one. That's a fake one, fake letters, yeah. So that's one of the ways to find out. We'll show you some other tips for spot fakes.
Is that a rose? I don't know.
Yeah, it's rose-ish. It's rose-like.
Pretty good. Like, this worked pretty good.
This was, like, very encouraging because we were like, oh, it is magic. It totally works. Great. I guess we're just all screwed. But it turns out that it worked really well because it was such an open-ended thing, right? We want to just make something with no constraints, artistic exploration, rock and roll. It's very good at that. Then we tried to make some book covers for a client, Red Hat, for the ebooks that we make them. Ones on the left are ones we've actually made. Ones on the right we made with this. This still required Photoshop. We had to, composite the text and assemble it. So it wasn't snap, crackle, pop. And they weren't quite there in our estimation, but they were kind of in the ballpark. So that worked reasonably well. Then we did some other stuff, which I'm not going to take you through, that was just a complete failure. Like, it didn't work.
Scary.
At all.
Scary stuff.
Oh, yeah. There were some terrifying photos and just things that didn't work. We very quickly started to realize what it was good at and what it wasn't, and also in the language area. So we'll get into what the effects of that are, but really quickly, just to see kind of overall here, this is a bunch of different stuff. So you can see the pictures of the Audis. There's 3 of them up there. Those were used in a concept deck. So great, and it brings ideas to life really fast. Fun fact, Audi does not make a car where their logo is on the inside of the trunk. Like, there's other problems. So
yeah, for like a license plate for a country that doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah, none of these are actually Audis. They are Audi-like. They kind of look like Audis. So, and even then, I think Jamie had to fix a couple of things, probably the logo for one. But so helpful, but not magic. And then the upper left, the little robo guy, that was part of a project. We were doing a mascot for a client. And the team was able to use it to do just a ton of different iterations really quickly. So that was fun and helpful from what they described. And the good thing about that is that, it wasn't that it by no means made the finished mascot, but what it did do was allow them to explore a lot of spaces more quickly than they would have been able to if they had to hand draw each one or if they had to use lower fidelity sketches. So that was really good.
What about your buddy's back pocket there?
Oh yeah, here's another tell. I have to set this down. So can I even zoom here? Oh yeah, I can. Oh, kind of. I'll just get out of this for a second.
Yeah, like that one from far looks great. And then the second you start dialing in, you're like, oh, no, that's weird.
What's going on with his butt? I don't know. He's got a really big pocket. There's like a whole book sitting back there. Why is the front of her shirt so much longer than the back?
Fashion.
Fashion? Maybe. Hard to say. So there are tells. It's always little indiscrepancies. And again, those will probably be fixed over time. But for now, they're easy ways to spot it. And then the photo of the backyard, dwelling with the pool, that was good because we were able to drop. That was an architectural rendering that was done by a design firm, and we were able. But the client wanted a pool in the backyard, and I'm like, well, I don't know. So we dumped it in there and told it to try and stick to this as much as you can, and then described a backyard with a pool, and it sort of put a little pool in there. So mission accomplished.
Super skinny pool.
Very skinny pool, yeah. And it took quite a few revs to get to that, but it did get there. And there are better tools. Again, it's early days, not only for the tools, but for our learning how to use them. So there are better ways to do it, but yeah, already out of the box, it was very helpful. And then, obviously, I guess you can see it in real life here, Luigi. So this was a bartender that we made for a party, an AI bartender. You're welcome to try it afterwards. It should probably work. And if you just type your name in, what it does is it takes your name, combines that with a list of ingredients that we had that night at the party, and then sends it to ChatGPT and says, can you please craft a cocktail, give it a name, tell me the history of this cocktail that doesn't exist, tell me the instructions for making it, and tell me how to best enjoy it. And it'll spit it out on that little thermal printer right there. And then you can take that to a real bar and see how that goes.
It did try to kill me.
It did. Yeah, this was called like the maximum overdrive or something.
Gave me a drink called the Maximum Overdrive that had 5 separate ounces, like 5 ounces of different alcohols.
Yeah. Mine was like the Krumme Breeze and had like mango juice. Yours was like, you came to party.
I typed in my daughter's name and it cranked out a beauty drink though after. So.
Right.
Also, the amount of, like, this thing is so cool, but the amount of hours we cranked into it was out of control.
It would definitely took some learning, but I give a lot of credit to the team who did it because they basically, that's a Raspberry Pi. This is like a bunch of garbage that they found upstairs and taped together. We did order the keyboard and the cool sign, but that's about it. And then they built this very small, simple interface on the front. So it wasn't that hard, and we have officially now built our first AI-powered app where it sends the prompt to ChatGPT, gets it back, and then interacts with a piece of hardware. So that's not nothing.
Thank you, Neil.
So yeah, our conclusions from these experiments, it does speed a few things up, for sure. There are some things we can do faster, but mostly what it lets us do is just things we couldn't have done before. It lets us create stock like from scratch instead of just trying to find something that's kind of close to the idea. It lets us do more strategy or more research, which we'll get to, you have to be careful, but it does do a lot of stuff that we just couldn't do, which is really cool. And the other thing is that it gets you like, that little expression like 80% of the work takes 20% of the time. Well, it helps with that 80%. You still have to do the 20% of the work, which will take you 80% of the time. But it's still great for sparking ideas and doing all kinds of things.
Yeah, like being an outsider, the 2 things I loved most about watching your experiments was one, I do think you're setting the foundation for just as these tools evolve, you've already got the knowledge and you're going to just, as they get better, you're going to already be in a much better place to use them. And then 2 is, here we always talk about failing fast. We had a whole Labnotes on the science of failure. And I feel like this helps you fail fast sometimes. So Jared, who did a Labnotes earlier, talked about the death of the blank page. So you're never staring at a blank page. You can just type in your problem. And even if it's terrible, what it spits out at you, it gives you that failure real quick, and it helps you identify maybe what's right quicker. And I think we saw that with a lot of the experiments.
Yeah, and we'll even show you, we'll show you a prompt, courtesy of Josh Melfi, that you can use to help refine your thinking, which is good. So even if sometimes you don't even know what the problem is or what you're trying to solve, and this can be a really good tool just for helping you think through something, which I think is pretty important, pretty powerful.
All these images you made in Midjourney, right?
Yeah. We're all made in Midjourney. That was, I based it off Beaker. He's blue now, and the nose is kind of freaking me out a bit, but still went with it.
Jokes.
That was...
3 droves.
I'm going to go with no. But Neil, don't stop being Neil ever, okay?
Right, okay.
Let's talk about these tropes.
Tropes.
They're probably things you've all heard of or debated.
Yeah, tips and tools and tropes. They're not even really tropes, I just like the alliteration. AI is coming for your job. It's not true. But people who know how to use it might be. So I think that a good way to think about it is, if you're a photographer back in the day and digital photography comes around and you're like, F that, I'm not interested. Well, eventually you would be eclipsed, and I'm sure the same thing happened to like carriage drivers. Like, technically we work
I thought you were going to go towards like Photoshop, but you went back.
Yeah, those shillelagh manufacturers got screwed. But I mean, we are in an industry we're called knowledge workers. So, we're probably going to have to get some knowledge. Like, we're going to have to continually be training, but not like, I think that I want to be clear. Like, I think there is this sort of like mildly fascist culture of like, always optimize, always train, always learn, always push. It's not that necessarily. I mean, you can do that, I guess, but it's just not stagnation. New things come along, try it, play with it, see if it helps you, if it does help you do what you're doing already. I think that's the important thing. Because it is not magic. It's just like we always keep saying, just because you got a pencil doesn't make you a writer. Well, just because you have AI doesn't make you a designer or a writer or a strategist. Really, it's always going to, I think, for the foreseeable future, boil down to the skills of the person using the tools, the same way it does with every other tool we use. But it seems like, oh, by the way, the prompt for this was a cryptographic cipher. I don't know. That's what I mean. It's a black box. It just comes up with what it comes up with. Sometimes it seems like magic. Maybe some of you have seen this before. Oh, boy. Now it's broken. Someone made a trailer for Star Wars if it was directed by Wes Anderson. And so they've got all this stuff happening, and then you can see that the characters are actually moving. This was done really, really simply. There's 2 tools you need to do this. One is Midjourney, and the other is called DID. So by using those things very cleverly, I can show you this, which is not as good, but I made this in 15 minutes. So if we did the same thing where we put Wes Anderson directing Harry Potter and Bill Murray was Dumbledore. So you go into Midjourney, you make a picture of exactly that. You literally type that in, and then you go into this app called DID, where you upload your photo, and what it's meant to do is do lip syncing. So I could put up a photo of you and then type crazy things for you to say. Probably not a great idea, this app. But if you put nothing, if you put no sound file, like you can upload let me rephrase this. You can put up a photo of Max, and then you can upload a recording of him saying something, and then it will match his lips to the recording of what he's saying. You can also type it, but for this, you just upload a blank sound file where it's not saying anything. So it just makes a video of it just like blinking and looking around. So someone had to figure that out. Person wasn't a developer. They were just a creative person. The tools are free. but and they're not very, like, you can see where it breaks on the beard and the hat gets kind of weird, but they cut it together using traditional video cutting tools and video editing tools, and they did it in a very clever way, very quickly, so that it looks like an actual trailer.
Well, and then the cleverness too of knowing that that's how Wes Anderson's like signature trailers, where there's one subtle movement.
Yeah.
So it feels like, oh, this was all purposeful, but there was a lot of cleverness just to get there. Human cleverness.
Yeah, and people see the finished product and are like, wow, AI does everything. It's like, it doesn't know. Like, it does amazing things, but the person who made it, or the people who made it, were the amazing ones. They came up with the cool idea. Another thing that people talk about is like prompts. Is it prompts? So I have to learn how to prompt? I got to become a prompt engineer? You don't. You don't have to become a prompt engineer. I would say that experience and education are still the defining factors. We'll show you an example of that after. But just like every designer has Photoshop, but they don't all use it the same way, and they don't all come up with the same quality of things. There are a few basic tips with prompting, but realistically, we'll talk about how you can get better. But the best advice is just experiment with it. Just start playing around with it in a very safe, easy way, and you will very quickly start to be getting better at it, learning tips and tricks. Speaking of, here's a tip and trick. Well, I don't know which one it is. So Josh Melfi gave me this. I can't remember where he's here. Where'd you find it, Josh? YouTube. There you go. Hot tip. What you do is, it's called like chain of thought prompting, I think. But the idea is that you can see, just without going through the whole thing, the first thing, it's like, you're going to be my prompt engineer. I want you to give me a good prompt. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to tell you what I want to know, and you're going to try and answer me. That's called a zero-shot prompt. I'm just going to ask you a question, you give me an answer. But then I want you to ask me some questions that you think might make your response better. And then it'll give you some questions. And then you can recycle that back in over and over as much as you want until you feel like, yeah, this is the thing I want, and I've landed at the answer I want. So it's an iterative process. But I also think it's very indicative of the state of things today, that like you have to cut and paste that into a website just to get it to do, this will not be this way for long. This is it in action. So I said, how can we resolve the AI alignment problem? Don't worry about that. And it was saying, oh, here's your answer, and then these are questions I think would make that prompt better. If you can tell me about that, I can refine what I'm telling you to ask me. Which is kind of interesting, I guess.
I think like Adobe Firefly does a good job of eliminating the copy paste.
That's right. So Adobe's going a different direction completely. They're doing, I shouldn't say completely, but they're taking a much more of a graphic interface. So you might not need to know a lot. In this example, so the one on the left, I just said, show me a stereo that's minimal, pointy, and industrial. And I got whatever that is. And then the one on the right, I said, show me a stereo that's Bauhaus and was designed by Dieter Rams. And it gave me what I was actually trying to do. But if I don't know who Dieter Rams is or what Bauhaus is, I'm not going to get there easily. So what Adobe's done is they've created filters like Snapchat where you can just be like, I want this style, I want Art Deco, I want whatever. You don't need to have that deep history, and potentially you can learn it by using it. Maybe that'll even spark your interest in Art Deco or whatever it is. So prompting is definitely like a part of it due to how early days it is with these things, but it shouldn't be intimidating. It's easy to play around with, and your best friends for learning how to do it are Google and YouTube. I highly recommend both of those.
Yeah, for me, I will think of what I want and Google best prompts for X. And then I'll find blog posts that have, here's 50 different examples, and then they show you the image and they show you the prompt that got there, and that's how I start copying and pasting from that. Which, to your point, I'm sure very quickly that'll be outdated.
It should. One would think, but for now, don't let it hold you back. There is no I think this probably has more FOMO around it than most things in the technology space. Yes, it's evolving quickly, but that's good. That means no one knows much for long because it's different the next day. So you really can't get very far behind right now, unless you're a researcher who's trying to build them. For us norms, it's not a problem. Another trope. Yeah, don't worry. It's all legal and reliable. By the way, I told Midjourney I wanted to see a picture of a cat burglar, and I don't know. It was like, here you go. So it's worth noting that, like, in terms of the legality, the technology has lapped the law. Law takes a long time. Technology sometimes doesn't. All of the large tech companies that are in this space either are being sued right now or have been sued, but I wouldn't say it's because they're doing nefarious things. I think it's just a very unclear space with a lot of competing interests. And so it's hard to say. Like, right now, you know, when you Google what happened in Watergate, Google gives you the answer. Nobody sweats that. But if I ask ChatGPT and it's referencing a story that was written in the Washington Post, maybe the Washington Post is like, well, I don't know, shouldn't we get some of that? Like, we wrote it. But again, there's 70 billion things it's read, so I don't know if it's reading that thing. And that's my very simple example. I think it's a lot more complicated. So that's why there's some things coming up we'll talk about, just some very basic stuff to protect yourself. But worth noting that it is very much a space in flux. And then privacy. So this is a good example of a tool that I like called Chat PDF, where you can just drop in a PDF and then you can talk to it. And you can ask it questions. So I threw in an old RFP that we got and was like, hey, can you summarize this for me? And it was like, boop, there you go. This is an old one. It's already over. We won. And then the next thing I was like, can you tell me the requirements? And it was like, yeah, they want a website. Here's their budget. Here's this, here's that. And it was amazingly helpful because I read that RFP and it was not scintillating. And so this gave me like a very quick idea about what was in it so I could decide where I wanted to focus, what I want to read, and just get a handle on it. Oh, those people are clapping for us. Can you hear it? That's nice. But where does this data... Yeah, there we go. Where does this data go when you dump it in, right? Like, who is Chat PDF? I don't know. Some randos somewhere? I don't know. So you have to be very careful about this. So when you put information out there, always think about where that's going. And some of the companies are already responding very quickly. OpenAI changed their API recently. So they made it so that if you use their API, like Luigi here does, very sensitive information, they will hold on to it for 30 days to make sure that you're not a gangster, and then they'll wipe it. And they promise not to use it to train GPT-5 or whatever the next one's going to be after that. But it's all just like...
A promise.
Yeah, like a pinky swear. I don't know. So, worth noting. This is called Perplexity. This is a free app you can throw on your iPhone right now if you haven't. It's great. It's just like ChatGPT. You can ask it questions, and I think it's for answering stuff. This is probably the best one out there right now. It behaves like the conversations are like ChatGPT. It's more succinct, which is nice. It doesn't. ChatGPT tends to be a little chatty, and it'll show like sources and things. Again, don't trust it. We'll get into that, but it's better, and it's free. But what happens when you ask it a very personal question about your medical history or something else? I don't know who owns this software and what their promises are to us and their data. So just very good to be careful about that, because it is kind of the Wild West right now. And just remember that, like, once you put it out there, it's out there. It's never coming back. It's on the internet. It's in somebody's data center. There is no undo. There is no unsend. So I'm not saying you should be terrified of it, but be cautious. Think before you... Anything that is sensitive, just think about it before you do it, because the tools are very alluring, and they don't tell you... They don't do a good job of describing what the dangers are. I mean, why would... There's no real reason to yet. Like, they put it on the web. Like, ChatGPT says, like, may occasionally produce fictitious results or something. And I'm like, yeah, may occasionally. There was a lawyer who just, I don't know if you saw in the news, who just got busted because he asked ChatGPT for, what do they call them, like case law examples? And it was like, oh yeah, here you go. Here's a bunch of case law examples. And were all totally made up. And then he sent them in, and then the other the other attorneys were like, I can't find this stuff anywhere. And like, we have all these law books and it's not in any of them. And then he was like, oh, hold on. And he went back and he's like, hey, what were the sources for those? And it was like, oh, here's the docket numbers, judge, date, everything. Nope, that was all totally made up. So he sent that back and they're like, I don't know, man, it still doesn't exist. So then he had to really apologize. He's probably not going to be a lawyer anymore. There was a teacher, I think in Texas or somewhere, some college, who failed his entire class because he thought they used ChatGPT to write their essays that they submitted. And he thought this by going to ChatGPT, putting in the essay, and they said, did you write this? And it was like, yeah, sure, I wrote that. So he was like, you all fail. Like, he doesn't know that it's a statistical analysis engine. It's just spitting back what seems like the most likely answer to what you've asked, but it doesn't know what you've actually asked. It has no context about the world. So not knowing how these things work is what makes them dangerous. People call them hallucinations, or they've started calling them confabulations for some reason. Maybe it's British people, I don't know. But it's definitely something to be aware of. I asked Claude the other day, what was the biggest hippo ever recorded? And it was like, oh, that was Mr. Beast. It was captured in Nairobi in 1961. There is no Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast does not exist. So maybe, I think we maybe mentioned this in the tips. I can't remember, but it's worth saying twice. Don't fact check these language models by using the language model, which seems obvious, but it can be tempting because you're like, well, where did you get this? And where did you get that? And it will totally make it sound legit. But it's still, you always need, if it's anything important, you need a third-party source to corroborate it.
That's where the tokens, I think, kind of helps me, where it's just predicting what logically goes next there. So did you write this thing? And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, 50-50 chance on that
Yeah,
one.
I wrote that.
Could have been like, no, I didn't write that one. But that one I did. Who knows? Third trope, don't believe the hype. It seems like it's pretty amazing, but I think it's worth looking at some of the things that people say. So AI will replace half of all jobs in the next decade, said by Guy, who is a VC investor in companies that make productivity software that are promising they can replace people. That's a good one, yeah. Half of all researchers think there's a 10% chance of causing human extinction. Like, who's like, I mean, it's 10%, I like those odds. Let's go for it. That was a survey put out to like thousands of AI researchers. I think the response rate for that question was like 3 or 4%. So sure, a couple of wingnuts were like, yeah, I'd say there's maybe a 10% chance. But that's not half of all researchers. But you know who loves headlines? Media. And I think it's important to think about what people are driving this hype cycle, who's pushing it right now, who has something to gain by it. I mean, some of them are more nefarious, some of them are less. But if I was Microsoft and I spent billions of dollars on this technology and someone asked me, how's it going? I'd be like, it's going great. It's going to change everything. You should 100% buy this, because what else would you say, right? Like, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but just that doesn't change the fact that they would have a biased opinion. And I don't think that they're doing anything, again, nefarious, but they're just doing what they do.
Did you make this image or no?
Somebody else made it with Midjourney, someone named Ang Krith. Yeah. I did type in Elon Musk is the devil, and well, then I couldn't get it to work well, so then I went on Google, and sure enough, somebody else spent a lot of time getting it just right.
Old school image generation.
Yeah. This is a Adobe Firefly. This is the video they used to promote it. I want to be clear, the Photoshop beta and the tools in it are incredible. This is not this incredible. Like, this is magic. And you can, kinda, but kinda. Like, it doesn't work that well, that fast, first shot, every time. It still takes a lot of time.
This is the highlight reel. This is the highlight reel.
This is the highlight reel, yeah. So this is like best case scenario, or some of it's aspirational. We're trying to get to this place where it will be able to do this for you, potentially. Still needs your creativity, still needs your idea, and it is amazing. Like, every slide I put in here was from that, and there were things I couldn't have done, filling in background, changing aspect ratios, and that's just simple stuff. It can do amazing stuff, but they do absolutely again, sell the dream. Same thing with this. This is the Gen 1. I saw this video and I was like, oh my God, the future has arrived. And then I went and looked at some stuff people made with it, and I was like, the future has not arrived. The future is janky. But it'll get there, and you still have to have the ideas of combining the things. So it is incredible, but not quite there. And this one we already talked about, AlphaFold, just an amazing piece of software that Google made. Again, there have been remember there was Watson that beat that guy on Jeopardy like 10 years ago, and there's AlphaGo, and there's DeepMind who beat chess, and there's AlphaFold that does this. These are like these incredible tools, but they still need teams of people behind them to make them work. And that's it. That's the experiments and the tropes. And any questions so far? We're gonna have questions at the end. But
Let's power through this next
Power
thing
through
and then
it?
open it up. Yeah, because let's just hit
Max
the takeaways.
wants to silence the people.
Well, I'm afraid someone's going to ask a giant bombshell question that's going to take 20 minutes.
Yeah, probably, yeah. You literally opened the presentation with that. What's the future? Okay, so for us, you can use it right now. These are from the experiments and just from talking to people, these are the use cases that we see. I'm not going to read them out to you, but they tend to be more like, again, exploratory, concept-oriented, getting your thinking going, variations on ideas, that kind of, almost like if you think about building a house, it's the rough-in stage. Like that's what it's really, really good for in lots of different ways. So nothing's stopping you from doing that. And then looking forward, so we've been trying to think about how to reasonably measure this out. And so we were thinking in these kind of 9-month cycles. If you think about, it says if you think about, from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0 was like 10 years. This is much faster, but it's not like 2 weeks. So we've been thinking, maybe 9 months is a reasonable amount of time to give the tools time to mature. There's still humans that have to bring them in, use them, learn them, get better at them. So right now, from now till maybe the end of the year even, we're talking about this kind of nascence phase where it's really just getting rolling. And so things are developing, some of the legal stuff's getting worked out, subscription models, business models. There are 1,000 SaaS companies with software tools being born every week and 1,000 more dying. So it is happening very quickly, a lot of turnover. Next section will probably be what we call like the augmentation phase, which I think is really, if I was going to characterize, I heard something the other day, someone said, what is AI? And the person was like, it was a bad choice of words in 1945. Like, it's not what it is right now. It's not an art of, we use all these words that personify it. Oh, it's learning, we're training it, it's saying this. Those are words you apply to people, right? So what it is it's augmenting intelligence. It augments your intelligence. It makes you able to do more things, more creative explorations, more strategy, more whatever. So I think in the next phase, that's where that's going to start to really come to life. You're going to get people more familiar with it. The tools are going to be more broadly adopted. It's going to be in productivity software and everything. So that's really interesting. And then the third cycle, and again, these dates are like they're guesses, but the third one, start to think about now, okay, we've all started to get this baseline. How does that start to evolve? And that's when I think things are going to get kind of weird and kind of fun-ish. So like, imagine if you were a mechanic on a ship in the Navy and you could ask the ship, how you doing today? Like, how are the engines running? Or if you're a marketer and you want to ask your dashboard, what was our highest performing ad last quarter? You can just, I think one of the biggest, most interesting applications long-term of artificial intelligence is that it's the gateway to your data, right? We've all got all this data, there's all this information kicking around, but you can't really get to it. There's not really an easy way. You get a bunch of data scientists, and they're not that useful a lot of times, so you're trying to figure out what this stuff means. But if you could just talk to it, that would kind of change everything. Like, that would suddenly let you apply your judgment based on real information and intelligence that you didn't have before. And I think that's really interesting, and that's probably where it's going in the foreseeable, nearish future.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying there applies to creativity as well. Like data, you could swap that over to ideation and creativity.
100%. what we're doing. You can talk to some of this.
I mean, I want credit for getting 40 plus slides before an AI pun type thing. So, but yeah, there's just what's happening
That
now
you
for
put in.
us. Yeah, the discussions we're having these days, a lot about training, everyone here, training ourselves, governance. We got some updates on how we govern internally and externally with partners. Yeah, your team's developing like a very succinct perspective on just what is our actual perspective. It's being pulled out of a lot of what we've.
Yeah, it's this, but not as all over the place.
Access, you guys are working on how we can all access these tools, and I mean, it changes every day, but there's a lot of different things you have to pay for. We are hiring in this world. That's a big topic, so if you know anyone, let us know. And then Sprint 2, you guys, have you kicked off already? Or I guess it's
Yep.
ongoing, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing ongoing. So a lot of the experiments and everything you saw, that was kind of Sprint 1. And now we've made some conclusions. So like Max said, now it's all about Sprint 2, which is be focusing on implementation to a large part. How do we roll this out? So this is like maybe the kickoff for that. But we are looking at how do we train, not just through professional development, through external sources, but even internally, what can we do to help? Because like I've heard at least 3 people tell me, I literally read, I'm not kidding, like an hour to 2 hours of this nonsense every day. And I've still had people come up and tell me stuff I had no idea about. And I was like, that's a really good idea. I should do it that way.
You sound stoked about that.
Yeah, great, another good idea. So I think that's going to be a really important part of that. And the governance, Sarah's going to talk about that tomorrow at Town Hall. Giving people the confidence to be able to use these tools without being freaked out, but also doing it in a way where we're not endangering anything. And access is coming too. Like you can use stuff now. Obviously, there are free tools out there, and people have got their own accounts. But we're looking for ways to make that available to people in a real way as part of their work.
Yeah. In terms of like big takeaways, for me, the biggest thing in the spirit of forwardness is on the next slide here. Sorry. Yeah, it's like if you're doing nothing, as you were saying, don't worry. Like no one's behind, I don't think, but. I would push forward. Like if you're doing nothing in the world of AI right now, I would push into the experimentation phase. Just open up some of these tools, experiment, do it within work and outside of work. Like my favorite experiment, a friend, Kyle, told me, he just asks his kids, like he tells stories to his kids. He's like, kids, tell me some character names and some animals and then give me a problem. Ask ChatGPT to write a story, a 4-minute long children's story. I did that. My kids loved it. Then I like went over to Midjourney and asked Midjourney to just like visualize those characters, showed them the characters. And it was so much fun. And that had nothing to do with work, but it was just helping me understand the tools. I'm in that phase now. And if you're in that phase, I think challenge people to push into your workflow. And that means not being experimental, but being purposeful in where it fits. Like I think we all know probably where like Google search fits into your workflow. For me, it's like the beginning, after I get a brief, pretty early on, I do initial research there. After a concept, I'll sometimes validate it. Sometimes I'm terrified to validate it because I'm afraid it's not good. And then roadblocks, like if there's a roadblock, sometimes that's how it fits into my workflow. Everyone knows that. We don't have that necessarily for AI tools. So if you're experimenting a lot, think about pushing into that. So yeah, move forward if you can. And then yeah, a few other tips and resources. We're almost wrapped up here.
Yeah. There's no experts, like we were saying. Don't be intimidated by any of this stuff. It is very accessible, easy to use. There are ones that are harder. Midjourney's through Discord, which is a pain in the butt. It's like, I always say it's like trying to do your taxes through Snapchat. Like it's just ridiculous, but you can get in there. And I think it's just watch YouTube videos if you're curious, and that will get you so far. There is a limitless number of people who want to tell you about this stuff. Not just us. Don't trust it. Don't trust chatbots. Like, they're very useful. Do not trust them. They do not know the difference between truth and lie, right and wrong. So just know that going in. Doesn't mean they're not useful. Super useful, but dodgy. And then what you were just saying, experiment. Yeah, just play with it. I think I did see a neat stat the other day that said, like, of the people using ChatGPT, they surveyed them, and like, not all of them, it was like 100 million, but they surveyed some of them, and like 7% said they were using it for work. So the other 93% were just mucking around, using it for fun, using it for their, like you said, make stories for your kids. Like, it's okay to just give it a whirl. We can make this available. These are just some resources. I would say find your own, but if you're looking for a place to start, these might be good. There's a guy named Matt Wolf who unfortunately goes by the handle Mr. E004, but he's very prodigious in making videos and explains it very well. So that's really good. AI Explained is way more like super. I'd like to learn about math. And you watch that one, and he'll tell you all about it. But it's very in depth and very good. Best newsletter, I think, although it's a bit like a fire hose, is the Rundown. It comes every day, but it'll always tell you like these are the 3 things that happened in AI today, because there's at least 3 every day, and then like a bunch of other stuff. Machine Learnings, that's just a good like a newsletter. It comes once a week, so a little lower flow, and a little more. It's been around for a while, even before this kind of took off, so it's a little more high level. And then the
Marketing AI Institute, Sam, it's been around 6 years, I think, and they do monthly newsletter and monthly podcast, and that one's tailored for marketing, so pretty relevant and pretty interesting.
Yeah, and if you want to learn how to use OpenAI or Midjourney, I mean, the best place to start, other than just regular YouTube, is with OpenAI and Midjourney. They have great documentation that tells you how to do it. So OpenAI has a prompting guide that says, here's great ways to get what you want. And Midjourney has tons of documentation. That's the one that's a little harder. You have to use it's like terminal commands. So if you want it to be 16:9, you have to type -- space 16:9. If you type it any other way, it doesn't work. So you have to get used to it, and it's a bit of a pain, but then it works. And that's it.
Wow. Any questions? Yeah. Anyone got anything? Yes, Kyle. We can't act. What was the worst experiment gone wrong? It's like a confidential thing, so we can't talk about it, but it took like an icon very related. Thanks, Amin. Always, it's the second Labnotes you've shouted something at the back that I'll have to edit out of the video. Yeah, they took like an icon from the brand, and like it was scary.
Yeah. Red Hat also had some pretty good epic failures, but part of that was just us learning to use it. So again, we were thinking like what you read in the media. We didn't have any other thing to go on, so we were like, I don't know, make me an ad for LinkedIn, and it was like, bagonk, here's some garbage, and we were like, I don't know. What am I supposed to ask it to do? And so we had to just keep trying until we were like, okay, break it down, smaller things, focus on this. Still going to composite in Photoshop afterwards, have to do that. But it got us there. And there's a guy who recently did a post that showed how he made this really neat picture of Muhammad Ali knocking him out as if he were George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. And it took him 17 hours, like using all AI tools, very good at them, 17 hours. So it's definitely not like Pixel Blammo.
Anyone else? Yeah, John.
They're using I don't really know what you mean by nodal. Nodal? They would just say
Like
modal.
the same stuff.
Yeah, it's the same stuff technology-wise, but they've all trained it differently. And if it helps, again, getting a little above my pay grade, but from this podcast, which if you're interested, I'll happily share it with you. It was 2.5 hours long. I was painting my ceiling. I had nothing else to do, so I listened to these nerds for 2.5 hours. But they were talking about how when you have a model, like they're all different, trained on different data sets, you get what's called a foundational model, and then you have to fine-tune it. And I'm starting to realize that fine-tuning is a gross understatement of what happens after that. So when they made, the story was that when they made GPT 3 or 4, I can't remember, before the fine-tuning, if you said like, why is the sky blue? It'd be like, why does it rain in the summer? Like it doesn't, you know what I mean? And they were like, that is not a valid answer to that question. So they have hundreds of people who help it tune and get better and get better. So there's still a massive manual component to these things to make them more useful.
I got a question. Are you nicer to ChatGPT than Midjourney?
Then Midjourney?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Well,
Because
because
ChatGPT is conversational, and I always
Yeah.
feel like I should be polite, and then Midjourney is just
well, you can't, because every word that I put into Midjourney, I'm like, oh, this is gonna screw it up. Like Midjourney, again, it's not literal, and it's like a black box with 1,000 levers, and none of them are labeled, and they don't do the same thing each time you pull them. So putting a space between two words or adding the word "ah," I literally, when I remember when Midjourney 5 came out, the makers put this post up, and they were like, cool, so it's out. Please give it a try. And there's this chat room over here where you can tell us like how it works. Like, we literally don't know what prompts are going to work well and which ones won't. We've only tried it like a few times because we only have like 12 people here. So go at it, millions of people, and tell us what's working and what isn't. So, and it used to be you weren't supposed to put in like articles and commas and things, and then it was like, oh no, but do that now, and like it just keeps changing. So with Midjourney, yeah, it's brass tacks, like this is what I want, and it still doesn't listen half the time. Whereas with ChatGPT, I'm always like, thank you, that was a great answer.
me too, and I feel weird doing it, but I do.
I, for one, welcome my new robot overlord. Oh, for sure, 100%, yeah. Yeah. When the machines come, I will be one of the favored.
Yeah, because the humans are here and you're not.
They're here, and I've already lost that one, so I'm cutting my losses.
Any other questions? Yes, Ellen.
I can't tell you why, but I can tell you that 100% it does. But I don't know if it's because they're all dudes. It could also be the training data, right? Because it's reflective of the pictures. So there's this story that I have in case anybody asked about it called the 8-year-old CEO. And I can tell you every time I typed in 8-year-old CEO, I got a cute little blonde, blue-eyed white boy looking back at me every single time. So I had to say girl, and then it made them female. And then I had to say Indian, or I had to say Asian. I had to say it because as far as it's concerned, you say CEO, you mean that. And so those biases are 100% there. You should be very aware of that when you're using it. I would say almost overcorrect for your own biases if you've given that thought and become aware of it. So I don't think it's always nefarious or always necessarily intentional. Some of it is a reflection of our society and uncomfortable things that we have baked in that we're trying to fix. But I think it's a very good point to be aware of the fact that you will absolutely get back biased images, and you need to correct for that consciously as best you can. And same with the answers, I'm sure. I don't have as good of an example, but yup.
The Marketing AI Institute has had an episode on DEI and AI, which it doesn't exactly address that, but it was interesting and relevant. My microphone's not working, but any other questions? Neil.
Oh, no. I think that I can't speak to obviously the future, but I will tell you that from what I've seen, not only is that not the case in the near future, but if you take that argument and you follow it to its logical conclusion, right? There are these commoditized tools that everyone has access to, and everyone can use those tools. The outputs will therefore then also be to some degree commoditized. Like, you're not able to take people, like if I want Patrick Stewart or Morgan Freeman or someone, I want that voice, I want all the associations with that person, they still own their identity. So there's that. But you're right, there will be some things that will absolutely go away. There will be some. I think anyone who says otherwise, is also selling you something. But I don't think it's as dramatic, and for the most part, it does augment things. So you're still gonna need the creativity, you're still gonna need a lot of fine tuning, a lot of tweaking, and even when the technology gets indistinguishable from a person, I still think that there's an argument to be made that there are elements that people who have it as an adjacent part of their career can bank on. Do you know what I mean? If you're someone who's known in any capacity, I'd rather hear from you, not a simulation of you. That's the best I got. We've answered all questions. It's the most thorough presentation.
Pertaining to AI ever.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks so much for coming, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. If you want to come up and use Luigi, you can. If you have any questions you didn't want to ask in public, you can ask those too.